Welcome everybody and welcome to our webinar, Constructing Digital Humanities Grant Proposals as a Librarian. This webinar has been organized by the ACRL Digital Humanities Discussion Group conveners, who are Nicole Eichmann-Calvara, Lauren Paradise, and me, I'm Angela Driesen. We have invited interesting speakers from different universities who will be talking in 5 presentations about different aspects of writing grant proposals. As our webinar allows only for 75 minutes altogether, we have split up the talks into 2 sections with quick discussions after each unit, followed by a general discussion at the end. We will be talking about the creation of timelines for grants, organizing the workflows, librarians as scholars, library-led digital humanities programs, and supporting digital humanities faculty projects. And I've listed here only short titles. For the full program and full titles, please consult our website, and I will place the link to our website once again in the chat. Questions can be placed in the chat. And we have also a shared documents for your notes, for which the link I will also place in the chat. At this point, I'll pass over directly to our moderator, Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to introduce each of our presentations and our presenters. Our first one that I'll be handing it over to is Creating Grant Timelines, the Ideal in the Real with Amanda Rust from Northeastern University Libraries. Thank you, Amanda.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Please bear with me for one moment while I try to share my screen. The typical start to webinar. So are people seeing my Twitter feed or a presentation?
Looks like you're all set.
Okay. We're seeing your slides.
Thanks a lot. So hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Amanda Rust. I'm the Associate Director for Services in the Digital Scholarship Group at Northeastern University Library, which is located in Boston, Massachusetts, for those that aren't familiar. And what I thought I would do today is sort of informally talk about some of the places that I've noticed both in my own work and kind of in grant reviewing, some areas of slippage in creating timelines. Please feel free to get a hold of me later at either email or Twitter. Either one is fine if you have questions. So I thought it would be helpful to lay out some of my experience in grant writing and management first. I'd say I have a medium level of experience, more than some, less than many others, which is maybe not the world's most helpful description of my experience, but we'll go with that. I've helped write a couple of NEH proposals, done a very small amount of grant review, basically once for the NEH. And most recently, I've been a co-PI on an IMLS Forums grant and a project director for an Andrew W. Mellon Foundation grant. So I'm gonna try to be really honest here, but please, if there are potential funders out there, do not judge me poorly, but take this as evidence of reflection for improvement. So I was trying to think about the one piece of advice that I would give to people, and it's this: double your timeline. I could be wrong, but I don't know of any grant project that was finished early. Grant writing can be fun, but I think it's an exercise in constructing the world as you would like it to be, rather than the world as it may actually be. So I think if I could talk to my past self, I would say double your timeline. Beyond that generic advice, again, I thought it'd be helpful to identify some frequent areas of slippage that I've run into. Some of what I say here might be project management approaches that you're already familiar with, but just in case, I'll go with it anyway. So the first thing to do is identify what you know and don't know about how long parts of your project will take, right? So where do you already have a sense of how long it will take? Maybe in the past, you know that you have digitized 200 items and it took 3 weeks. or you've encoded 10 texts and it took 2 months, or created 2 totally new workshops and it took 5 weeks. If you are planning on using any vendors for your project, this is where you can possibly get approximate times ahead of time, right? Get a general commitment from them. Yes, it will take us 4 weeks to digitize your 1,000 images, or 2 months to restore that manuscript, etc. However, for a lot of our projects, we are probably trying out new workflows or new systems. And that is what, in a lot of ways makes it research, right? You're developing, trying, and assessing a new approach, meaning in those cases, you have no idea how long anything will take, and you're trying to estimate new activity. So I think in those cases, one of the most effective strategies is to specifically look for hidden labor. So I'm most recently have been involved in digital history projects, so that's what I can use as an example. So think about your experience with, digitization, right? In my experience in big digitization projects, metadata is often overlooked, right? Mass digitization is sort of only the first step. So you might get back X thousands of images from your vendor, but that is not what actually gets the local history project started. The kinds of things that people want to do in digital humanities projects almost always require what we can call enhanced digitization, right? Super robust metadata, detailed IIIF manifests, really clean OCR, stuff that doesn't generally happen in a mass digitization process, and stuff that requires human intervention, right? So a big bottleneck is often this kind of post-processing. So whenever there's a timeline item for digitization, really, really dig into it. I will say I have made mistakes. Ask me how I know. Another big form of hidden labor is communication. As I've written more grants, I've gotten better at communication plans, and importantly, staffing for those communication plans, either internal or external communication plans. But I think explicitly making a communication plan part of your overall timeline can help pin down that timeline. And again, include internal communication, right? Even formalize it a little. If at various points you need detailed feedback from other colleagues, department heads, your director, your dean, schedule a half-day retreat. I think this is something, again, that we all forget to write down. And I'm sure that other folks here can think of a lot of forms of hidden labor that go into your work every day. So focus on that. And another way to address, I think, time slippages is to write iterations into your grant timeline. You are going to iterate anyway. You're going to need to go back and change ideas and fix things. So why not write that process into your timeline? So let's say you have, again, like an imaginary project of 5,000 items to digitize in partnership with a local group in your town. And you want to be collaborative and responsive, and you need a timeline. One way to take a look at this is right into the timeline. Let's test 100 items, see how it looks. Give ourselves 2 to 4 weeks to make changes, talk to our partners. Then test another 500 items, make changes, talk to our partners, then digitize your full 5,000. I think in this way, when you account for debriefs and check-ins and changes, you write into the grant time and space to be accountable to your partners and yourself and your grant staff. And the other benefit of this approach is that it gives you an opportunity to use trendy buzzwords like iterate and prototype and feedback and circle back and other terms like that, which I use all the time myself. And so to sort of wrap up, I think after hidden labor, the next thing to really think through is how you can and will work with your team, right? The working with people piece of it. And the first thing I think I would say is if you are building a team of new people, do not be optimistic about your hiring timeline. Always assume hiring will take more time than you think. Hiring, like many other things, is very much driven by external dependencies. So I think in addition to identifying your hidden labor, identifying your external dependencies will help you find another sort of key spot of slippage. For example, during a recent grant project I was involved in, our campus switched HR systems, yay, which meant that key hiring systems were just frozen for a bit. When you can, propose full-time benefited positions, not part-time. I realize, talking about dependencies, this depends on how much capacity your organization is, how large the grant is, but it's better for workers and it's better for the grant, right? In an ideal world, we all get the base funding that we deserve. rather than relying on grants, but at the very least, think about how to make temporary positions robust and benefited. In a very mercenary way, to get back to timelines, it makes the project more predictable. If you hire part-time folks, you should be prepared for and support those people looking for full-time employment. You might have more turnover with part-time staff. Related to hiring timelines is the diversity of your applicant pool. And this is where I think grant funding can set up some perverse incentives. Often if you are hiring new staff during a grant period, there's pressure to do it very quickly rather than allowing for a period of inclusive recruitment. So you might be forced to say, we have to review applications by November 1st, rather than we will review applications when we feel like we have a sufficiently diverse pool. I have no firm answer for these kind of conflicting incentives, but to write those values into the grant and give yourself a lot of time for the hiring process, right? So if that's valuable, write it into the timeline. And I think what I will sort of wrap up with is saying, I think particularly at this moment, there's a real renewed focus on community-based projects, right? This has already been a big strand in digital humanities and digital archives. And I think a lot of organizations are going to want to have sort of community collaborative archival projects moving forward. Make sure that you leave time to really develop robust partnerships and be accountable to your partners. Again, literally write it in, right? 2 to 4 weeks to check back with your partners and make sure they agree with what you're doing. Write that in 2 or 3 times during the grant. In the interest of time, I don't want to take up too much time because we have a bunch of other sort of amazing people to talk. So I will wrap it up there and I'm happy to talk more later.
Awesome. Amanda, thank you so much for a thoughtful presentation with lots of super valuable advice. So next we're going to take it over to Charlotte Nunes, who's at Lafayette College Libraries. She'll be presenting the Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium Digital Archive, organizing workflows among academic libraries, public libraries, and community partners. Thank you, Charlotte.
Hi, thank you. I want to thank you, Amanda, for that presentation. That was great. And I want to thank the conveners of this webinar as well. I'm just going to put a couple of links in the chat in case people want to reference what I'm talking about. Let's see. Do you see that? Did that come through? Should have been a couple of links.
I don't see any links come through, but you're also welcome to put it into the community document if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah. Why don't I do that? Okay. Good idea. Okay, so I just pasted those links in the community document. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so sound is good and image is good. You should see the landing page of the Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium.
Yep, you're all set.
Okay, okay, great. I'm going to be speaking today about the Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium, and this is a grant effort out of Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. I'm not going to be focusing so much on how the grant came to be today, though I'm happy to communicate with anybody about that after the fact. I do just want to briefly acknowledge Maurice Luker of Foundation Relations at Lafayette and Abu Rizvi, former provost of Lafayette, who both kind of led the effort of getting this grant proposed. So I'll be offering some reflections more on how the grant is going, the workflows that we've developed and sort of the strategies that we've been using to engage multiple collaborators. So first of all, just a little bit of a background on the Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium, or LVEHC. It's a 4-year grant initiative supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation through June of 2021. The goal of the grant is to foster collaboration across campuses, libraries, cultural institutions, and community partners in the Lehigh Valley region of Eastern Pennsylvania. And the types of themes we explore include the diversity of communities, the changing nature of work, the environment and sense of place in the Lehigh Valley, and all during the past half century. So there's an emphasis on that past half century time frame to kind of fill in where, if you wanted to do some archival research about any of these topics in the Lehigh Valley, they're kind of slim pickings. There's not a lot to work with. So the idea was to kind of develop some actual raw material for research about this recent history. So as I mentioned, Lafayette is a staging ground for the grant, but the steering committee for the grant includes representatives from the Lehigh Valley Association of Independent Colleges, the Allentown Art Museum, the Sigel Museum, Northampton County Historical and Genealogical Society, among many other partners. So one of the main outcomes of the grant is the LVEHC Digital Archive, and this is a regional digital archive representing diverse collection building efforts across the Lehigh Valley. And this is the topic of my talk today, so I'll get to that momentarily. One of the most significant contributions of the LVEHC is the precedent it sets for putting libraries at the center of campus community partnerships. Lafayette College Libraries is a formal partner on the grant. And in my role as director of Lafayette College Libraries Digital Scholarship Services, I co-direct the grant with Professor of Anthropology and Sociology, Andrea Smith. Kate Pitt serves as coordinator for the grant, and all staff members in my department of the library contribute to the construction of the in-process regional digital archive. And I do want to just briefly acknowledge them all by name. Adam Malantonio, Digital Initiatives Developer, John Clark, GIS Librarian, Paul Miller, Digital Resources Curator, Nora Egloff, Digital Repository Librarian, and Jenna Avon, Digital Initiatives Librarian. So all of them have really put in a lot of amazing work and effort to this digital archive. So let's take a quick look. I wanted to provide just a brief tour of the in-process digital archive. So we've got several projects already in the archive and several projects in process, and those will continue through June 2021, if not beyond. I'll just say, just to give you a little bit of a sense of the range of primary source materials, we've got oral histories, family photographs, historic maps, ephemera, and other materials that document ethnic and immigrant communities, emergent economies and the deindustrial era in the region, relationships between culture and the environment, and many other topics. And contributors so far have included faculty, students, archivists, academic librarians, public librarians, and community partners, such as members of the two local chapters of the NAACP. So I'll just give you a little taste of some of the collections that we've got so far. This is a collaboration between the Easton, Pennsylvania chapter of the NAACP and the Sigel Museum, which is the sort of local historical cultural heritage institution. And you can see that this collection includes quite a range of materials. So we have newspaper clippings, family photographs. We have a series of debutante ball, NAACP debutante ball programs, which are always a big hit that have been used for teaching. Just gives you a little bit of an idea. Feel free to explore more on your own. I will also just quickly highlight the in-process Lehigh Valley Historic Map Collection. So this is a collaboration. John Clark of Lafayette College, the GIS librarian, is really leading a pretty amazing charge to connect with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and many area archives to work together to pull together their geospatial data, a lot of map images. So that's a really exciting collection that's in process. And this is the Allentown Art Museum Lehigh Valley collection. So this is, these are all works of art that have some kind of connection with the Lehigh Valley. They might feature subject matter in the Lehigh Valley. They might be created by an artist with roots in the Lehigh Valley or who practices in the Lehigh Valley. We have a number of oral history collections. I will just briefly take a look at Latina Women of the Lehigh Valley. So this was a project run by faculty and students out of Cedar Crest to highlight kind of the Latina experience in the Lehigh Valley. And we did include the pedagogical materials that the students used in order to put this together. And I'll also just briefly highlight the Black Bethlehem project. And this was a project based out of Bethlehem Area Public Library that's focused on the Black experience in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So in order to kind of actualize these community engaged digital collections, we do have, I wanted to kind of highlight our workflow documents. And these two I'm happy to share with anyone. Feel free to get in touch with me. The goal of the digital archive is for community partners to retain autonomy over the collection building process, excuse me, while accessing the resources they need to render collections sustainable in the long term. So this relationship begins with a series of workflow documents that really structure an intentional relationship. It's beginning with this memorandum of understanding document for partnering organizations. And this document is an opportunity for Lafayette College Libraries, Digital Scholarship Services, and a community, and a partnering organization, for instance, a public library or a community organization, to intentionally set mutually agreeable terms for the partnership. The MOU emphasizes that contributions to the LVEHC Digital Archive are non-exclusive, so their community partners can archive, display, and circulate their digital assets anywhere they would like, in addition to the LVEHC Digital Archive. And the MOU stipulates that upon request, DSS will provide copies of the digital assets to the community partner. So I thought we would just take a look. We rely on a shared drive, a Google Drive, to organize this work. So we have one big folder that has all of the project subfolders. So these are, we've got a folder for every in-process collection. And I thought we can kind of think about we can take a look at some of the workflow documents for oral histories, just to sort of get a sense of the type of documents that DSS has developed. And you take a look. This is an oral history consent form template. So anytime that a grantee is, they've had a grant project approved, they're doing an oral history project, they get a starter pack, a term coined by Jana Avon, a digital initiatives librarian, of workflow documents. And so the oral history starter pack includes this oral history consent form template, which we developed in partnership with IRB at Lafayette. And this has been helpful. It just expedites. It can expedite rather than individual project grantees needing to develop their own oral history consent form from scratch. They can work with our template. And certainly they may, in conversation with other IRBs or community partners, they may change this significantly, but it just gives them something to work with to start. We also have, we provide portable recorders for grantees. And so we have Nora Egloff, digital repository librarian, created pretty extensive directions, extensive but very straightforward directions for how to take advantage of that technology. So we provide that. We have an oral history interview metadata form, which grantees can be handy for grantees to have on hand as they're conducting oral histories. They can record information such as the interviewee name, date of interview, brief summary. They can take notes on this form, and they can use that, the contents of this form, to complete the metadata form for oral histories that we ask grantees to complete for every oral history. So this just has sort of basic metadata about each interview. And it's a Google form, so it automatically generates a spreadsheet, which is very useful for us because in DSS, Digital Scholarship Services, we can use these spreadsheets in order to automatically transfer that metadata into the LVHC Digital Archive. We have an oral history redaction protocol that grantees, I think, have also found helpful, right? Just sort of provide some parameters and some guidelines to how to think about potential redactions in a given interview. And I want to acknowledge the Queer Archives Project at Lafayette College. This redaction form is based on the redaction protocol in place for that project. So we end up with every oral history project, we end up with an audited transcript, an MP3, in addition to a WAV file of the oral history and the profile picture for the interviewee. And so I just wanted to sort of show this as the final items that end up going in the LVHC Digital Archive. Of course, we have many other items associated with each interview, but we kind of break out the finalized items that go into the Digital Archive, and that has been extremely, I think, a really, really important tactic, just to make, since we do have multiple staff members and multiple partners working within these shared folders, just to make sure we're all clear on what's going into the Digital Archive. So I hope that the LVHC Digital Archive can serve as a model for how academic libraries can be key actors in facilitating reciprocal campus community partnerships. We have definitely found that as a campus commitment that intentionally centers the interests of community partners, the digital archives definitely yields rich benefits for campus constituencies as well, namely faculty and students, in the way of high impact teaching and research opportunities. And that's something I won't get into today, but we do have interpretive exhibits on the site as well that faculty and students have created. So that's something that I'm happy to speak to any of you about as well. So I'll leave it there and welcome any feedback and questions.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was really insightful. Thank you. You can't say enough about documentation for grant writing, I'm sure, and its importance. So thanks so much for that. Next, I'd like to introduce Haley Johnson and Sarah Sims. They're at Louisiana State University. Their presentation is Breaking Barriers, Librarians as Public History Scholars. So thank you so much, Haley and Sarah.
Well, hey y'all, we just want to thank you so much for allowing us to speak today. We're really excited to share our experiences with digital humanities and the grants that we've received towards that end. Haley is the GovDocs librarian at LSU, and I am the student success and undergraduate librarian here as well. We've actually worked together for about 7 years. We're at LSU together now, but we were at a previous institution before. And so having that in mind, one quick note that we like to share is in our experience, it helps immensely when doing large scale grant funded projects to have a partner with you on the project. So someone who holds the project in the same regard, has a similar work ethic, drive, and dedication.
There we go. All right, so we conduct research on a World War II alien internment camp for Japanese civilian men that was located at Camp Livingston in central Louisiana. The history of this camp had long been forgotten in the state and even in some cases around the nation. To be able to research this camp, the men held within it, and the program of enemy alien internment, we had to travel to get information from places across the country, from New York to DC to Los Angeles to Honolulu. The research we have done on the mainland has consisted of archival research, including reports, photographs, letters written by the men, and artifacts created by the men held in camp. Hawaii allowed for us to do this type of archival research as well as meet the children of the men who were held in Livingston in camps like it. To do this archival travel required the pursuit of grant funding. So we started very small and have gradually grown our efforts as the scope of our project and work has grown. So grant writing is this magic combination of facts and persuasive writing that's aimed at translating how your project fits within the larger goal or mission of the grant-making organization. We have learned a lot about grant writing. I became a certified grant writer, but together we've also learned a lot through just going through the process of doing grants over the course of several years. When writing a grant, translating your passion for the project and how it is unique and important are two major things to keep in mind as you write. Without translating these, you won't make your proposal stand out from all the others received. So as you write with those in mind, also mimic the language included in the RFP. Follow all instructions, even like page limits, and if they have a section with optional suggested attachments, don't think of those as optional, include them. Demographics and statistics can really set your grant apart. If you can provide data about the populations and communities that your proposed grant will benefit, it makes a very strong case to the grant reviewers. In our case, it helps that I'm a government documents librarian, so finding demographics and statistics to support our grant narrative is second nature, but it's something that we can all do. We just have to make sure to do our research. So just like a research paper, you definitely need to do your homework, not only on the grant stipulations, but the subject at hand as well. As we become more versed in our topic and more knowledgeable, we were able to go after larger grants. It's never a bad idea to partner with other scholars in the field on the grant either, especially if they can fill in any gaps with knowledge or expertise.
And we can't stress enough that oftentimes grants like you to have scholars associated with your project. From the traveling exhibitions and bookshelves that ALA offers, all the way to an NEH digital projects for the public grant. Scholars and the caliber of who you are working with is an important component. So we suggest going outside of library conferences to present your work. It's at these conferences that you can highlight the multidisciplinary nature of our work and find scholars who can partner with you. Participating in conferences outside of libraries tied to the subjects of your digital humanities project is integral and honestly can be a little daunting at first. But this is where you can make connections. You don't even need to have a specific project in mind when you are there. Network with those scholars who gave presentations that were interesting. So for example, we have presented at the Conference for the Association of Asian American Studies, as well as at the Louisiana Historical Association. And at both, we received incredible feedback on our project, as well as met the scholars who we would eventually partner with for our NEH grant. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box and build those relationships with other academics. We often hear that librarians don't feel that professors really see the value that they can bring. So this is an excellent opportunity to change that and become a key component to the work they are doing and have them benefit your projects as well. So get creative and don't be afraid to ask. The worst that they can do is say no. But having respected scholars in the field will make the grant application much better. And it also shows the value of the grant outside of librarianship. From our experience, scholars have been more than happy to work with us either on projects or as reviewers for our grants. So as I just mentioned, through presenting and networking with scholars in the Asian American studies and history fields, we've been able to make a lot of connections. One of those earliest connections we made was by simply asking someone presenting at a conference to have coffee with us. This person happens to be a leader in their field of study. This initial meeting turned into further conference presentations and is actually how we were approached to partner on a grant to make materials related to Camp Livingston available in a digital repository that would be available to scholars and the general public. Initially, our current grant partners pursued or wanted us to pursue the IMLS grant, but the timeline was too quick of a turnaround. And after we reviewed the grant guidelines, we felt that it was not an appropriate fit for what we ultimately wanted to achieve. So we decided to look for other grant opportunities that would be more fitting for the project. That's when we found the NEH Digital Projects for the Public Discovery Grant, which is the first of a 3-tiered grant that then includes a discovery phase, a prototyping phase, and a production phase. Our partners agreed that this grant was a better fit, and we all decided that we would take the lead on the grant and be the PIs. So this is an important point. The library on this project is acting as the lead, and it's a natural fit for libraries and librarians to fill this role, as our role is to make connections, and this is a perfect example of how we can do this beyond our library walls. This grant funds projects in digital platforms or formats, such as a website, that interprets and analyzes humanities content. In addition to the digital format, the development of resources that can be used for classrooms, such as lesson plans, scholarly essays, maps, timelines, can be incorporated.
So the NEH grant proposal is a beast. Don't be mistaken about that. It took us weeks to put the entire proposal together. It includes the usual information like your budgets, your timelines, and your project descriptions. But this particular grant proposal also required written things on humanities content related to the project. By the time that we put this particular grant together, we had become experts in our own right on the topic and where the materials were held. So while it was work to put these together, it would have been extremely difficult for us to do this at the initial outset of our project in 2016. Another piece that made this grant proposal successful was the inclusion of prominent scholars in the field, people who we met at conferences or reached out to through email because of our similar research interests. In the end, it felt like a small community had become a part of this grant project. So surprise, we did receive funding for the discovery phase of the grant, which basically means that this grant funds the planning of the larger project. So it's expected that you apply for the additional grant phases like prototyping and production. But because of the current pandemic, we are unable to travel as planned. So we're trying to work around this by having online meetings with our 2 partners, the expert in the field and an organization that is well known for their online presence as a digital repository of history and material related to the Japanese American experience.
Grants are an amazing way to support the work that libraries and librarians do. But we think that having a purpose beyond obtaining funding is important in first getting the grant, but also in being able to be successful throughout the entire process. For us, social justice is the motivating factor behind all of the grants that we pursue. We wholeheartedly believe that the work of librarians is entrenched in social justice. We believe it is imperative that we move beyond the idea of neutrality when it comes to collections and highlighting histories that have been marginalized. So we must dig in and do the work.
So it's through grant funding that we can accomplish these goals. We've worked on numerous grants beyond what we've talked about today, but all are connected in our belief of bringing those marginalized histories to the forefront of discourse. We've sought out programming grants through ALA that highlighted narratives that tied to our area but weren't being shared on our campus. Our most recent grants have helped us bring names, voices, and experiences from 80 years ago, those histories and stories that had not been included in the main conversation, to the forefront. We know that the most effective place to share information is online, and it can be a great equalizer. We have begun to move our efforts to a digital focus so that other scholars, students, and the general public can easily access the history and items that we have had to travel so extensively for. We are trying to break down that last barrier to this information.
This is of utmost importance to us. The items that we have found, photographs, documents, letters, three-dimensional artifacts, and ephemera that are unique to this time in history and are critical pieces in understanding how the men of Japanese ancestry that were held in Camp Livingston and other similar camps were able to cope with the trauma of internment. With these pieces digitized, then access to a larger audience, which includes the general public, students, and scholars, would be available, and the depth and breadth of research into this history could occur on a greater scale. Recent events such as the proposed use of Fort Sill as a detention center for immigrants and asylum seekers, and rhetoric in the political sphere are grim reminders that we are at risk of repeating this dark chapter in American history. By making the collections that document the Japanese and Japanese American victims' experiences of internment and involuntary incarceration during World War II available digitally, we are one step closer in ensuring that these experiences are not forgotten. It is a grim reminder of the effects of racism and xenophobia, but the work that will come from this will hopefully lead us down a road where we remember, but do not repeat these egregious actions. Thanks, y'all. Those were our contact information. If you have any questions, want to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Haley and Sarah. That was fabulous. So we're at a point right now where we've given ourselves 5 minutes because Zoom fatigue is a thing. If you have any burning questions, we would invite you to submit those through the chat right now, or you can also unmute your mic right now if you like as well. And if you don't have burning questions, please feel free to use this as a break, a breather, whatever that might be. We will reconvene at 12:45. Or in 5 minutes rather, sorry, I'm in Colorado, whatever time it is for you. So yeah, if you have any questions now, please feel free to plug them in. And I have a couple that have already been listed here that I can give to our presenters. But meanwhile, I'd like to give you a moment to put things into the chat.
Charlotte, are you still around, or did you step away for a second?
I'm here.
So this is Franny. I was wondering if you could talk for a second. I guess I had 2 questions. One was, I was wondering what role of digital preservation your institution was playing for this community archive. And the second is, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you were managing kind of access restrictions for your Google Drive with all of the books that are kind of coming in and out of it there.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with that question because that's a quicker to answer. You're right. You raise what really is a concern, which is that there are not really adequate security. There's not really an adequate way to kind of restrict access. So unfortunately, just given the nature of shared drives, so we use the shared drive through Lafayette. So luckily we are able to, it's fantastic that we are, this is a relatively new development at Lafayette, able to add people external to the Lafayette community. So that's been absolutely critical, of course. But, and it's incredibly handy as a tool, but unfortunately we can't restrict anything. So, anybody who has access to that shared drive has access to everything in it. So what we have done is just been really straightforward about, with a given grantee, we just send them, direct links to their folder and serve the documents in their particular folders. And we haven't actually had a single problem yet with anybody going into anywhere else, poking around. I think it actually takes a little bit of, you need to kind of know a little something about how Google Drives work in order to actually explore them. And I think that that I mean, maybe that's been kind of an advantage, is that a lot of the grantees we're working with don't have a ton of experience in Google Drive, so they just haven't gone. There's been a bit of a learning curve for them to use the folders that they have access to. So we haven't, I mean, I'm dissatisfied really with the ability that we have to restrict access. It would be great if we could really just keep limit access just to grantees, just also for simplicity purposes, not only for security purposes, but we can't at this point. And then in terms of preservation, so those of you who are familiar with Omeka probably noticed that the LVHC Digital Archive is on Omeka, which is a platform for digital exhibits. So our department and the library have made a commitment to maintain this platform, essentially, you know, for the long run. So we do work closely with ITS on that commitment. However, we also are open to, depending on the usage, we want to sort of get a feel for how the digital archive gets used. And it could be that some materials from the Omeka version of the digital archive do ultimately get archived longer term in our digital repository, the Lafayette College Library's digital repository. So that's something that we have a door open to, that we just sort of remain in communication with our grant partners about. If that's something they're interested in, that's certainly something we can communicate with them about. So there are kind of two layers of preservation going on there, or two layers of a preservation conversation going on there.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat too.
Oh, let's see.
Um,
I think it for Haley and Sarah.
I'll go ahead and read it if that's helpful. So it looks like they're answering it too. So Jennifer Cerventi from the NEH Office of Digital Humanities is joining us today, and she's asked Haley and Sarah if they've reached out to her colleagues at NEH before submitting the applications for any consultation to read the draft, and whether the FAQ document and the other pieces that NEH provides are helpful. Haley.
And this is Haley. We did not reach out beforehand for consultation about our submission, but we did really utilize the FAQ and the sample narratives. That was extremely helpful for us. And I would recommend that to anyone who's thinking of submitting an application, to review those and to reach out, but we didn't unfortunately take advantage of that service.
Right. We have another question, Amanda, if you're willing to answer this in a minute, we can come back to it as well. There's a question regarding community-based projects and advice on building partnerships with the community, and wondering if you can briefly address how you manage expectations working with community partners, whether it's creating grant timelines or anything else that you can speak to for a successful partnership. And I think that can be open to anyone, but Amanda, this was specific for you.
Sure. And I should also say I have learned many things from Jordana Mikanyi, who is our university archivist. So I think the number one, or one of the number ones for me, is being upfront about the bureaucracy, right? Like, there have been times when I have wanted to get people paid very quickly, and the university systems actually kind of preclude in some cases. This might not be exactly what you're asking, but you know, I feel like it's very functional, where if you have a partnership and you're supposed to subgrant them some money, you have to worry a lot about how to actually make that happen quickly. So sorry, now there's a car alarm going off outside. So I think it's sort of know the limitations of your organization, right? And where you can really push against your organization, against those limitations, and then also sort of let your partners know about those. But I think this is going to sound a little bit abstract, but it's really in the kind of coming up with a research question with a research project stage, right, is where it can feel very messy. Like, for me, sometimes I have a bit of control issues, and it can feel very messy to be in the brainstorming stage, but letting your brainstorming stage have some room so that you come up with a mutually beneficial project is what I think then gets into managing expectations in terms of, you know, we can promise a small version, a medium version, and a large version, but if we're promising something that's mutually beneficial, then people are, I think, generally much more able to be flexible on both sides. I'm not sure, I feel like I had too many thoughts all at once, but I'll stick with that as a short answer.
No, that's super helpful. Thank you so much. And we can bring that back up for the general Q&A if anyone wants to address it or address it further. Awesome. So at this point, I'd like to take about 30 seconds, and we're just going to take a breather, a 30-second breather, and then I'm going to introduce our next speakers. So take a breath. Okay, I hope that that was helpful for everyone. It's always helpful for me to take even tiny micro breaks when we are on Zoom for extended periods of time. Well, thank you so much for our first three presenters. Now I'd like to introduce our next next presenter. The presentation is Shut Up and Take the Melon Money, Adapting a Library-Led Digital Humanities Program to Accommodate Grant Funding. And that's with R.C. Meisler and Kevin Moore from Gettysburg College. Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone. Let's see. All right. Okay, is my screen showing up?
Yep, you're set.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so thanks and good afternoon, everyone. This is Adapting a Library-Led Digital Humanities Program to Accommodate Grant Funding. And our subtitle is Shut Up and Take the Melon Money, which is a play off the meme of Philip J. Fry in Futurama saying, "Shut up and take my money," which, according to knowyourmeme.com, is a way to, quote, express enthusiastic approval towards an idea. And we are very enthusiastic to be here today to present. So my name is R.C. Meisler. I'm the Systems Librarian at Gettysburg College. And with me is...
My name is Kevin Moore. I'm a Research and Instruction Librarian at Gettysburg College.
All right, so Kevin and I are members of Muslim Libraries Digital Scholarship Committee, and we facilitate our Digital Scholarship Summer Fellowship, which is an 8-week library-led program that introduces students to digital tools and DH methods to create a research project of their own design. Today, we're going to go through how our Digital Humanities program moved from local to grant funding and how we have pivoted from an experimental concept to an institutionalized program. But to begin, we want to start with very much gratitude to all of the organizations and people who have supported the program, especially the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Pennsylvania Consortium for the Liberal Arts, Gettysburg College, and our office of our president and our grants office very specifically. We also thank Dean Robin Wagner and Assistant Dean Janelle Wurzberger of the Libraries Administration and the members of the Libraries Digital Scholarship Committee. So Gettysburg College is a private liberal arts undergraduate institution with about 2,600 students. There's no center for DH. There's not a mandate for DH work in the curriculum, but we do have faculty who have created some pretty cool digital projects. It's not our usual mode of scholarship though. But in 2015, the library began thinking more specifically about how to get more faculty interested in doing digital humanities. And from that, the Digital Scholarship Summer Fellowship, or DSSF, was formed. So DSSF, as I mentioned, gives students a chance to create their own public-facing digital project with support from librarians. Our fellows attend workshops during the 8-week summer program that focus on DH tools and methods. They conduct independent research. This program began as a way to generate interest from the bottom up with the idea that the work done by students would inspire faculty. But that didn't happen so much. What it did do is transform into a high-impact student experience, which gives students and librarians a way to think about scholarship in innovative ways. It's also created a feeder program in which we hire our fellows during the academic year so they can support faculty and students using digital tools. The summer program is managed by the library's Digital Scholarship Committee. Librarians deliver workshops that deal with a wide range of DH tools and concepts and mentor students throughout the summer. And at the end of the program, students present their projects in a public forum. During the academic year, students act as peer mentors and often participate in digital assignment design. So in terms of costs, we provide about 5 to 6 students a stipend and housing during the summer, which is about $4,000 per fellow. We also pay for a few meals, meetups within the DH programs, and some outside speakers. During the academic year, we hire 2 to 3 students, pay $8.50 an hour, and they work about 4 to 6 hours per week. So for funding, for the first 2 years, the program is very generously funded out of the Provost Office, our Center for Creative Teaching and Learning, and various library endowments. But we knew we needed to find a way to make the program sustainable. So we sought out various external means to make it happen. So now I'll turn it over to Kevin. He's going to talk about moving towards grant funding, how we've adapted the program.
Thanks so much, RC. So like RC mentioned, we already had a program that was being funded using a sort of patchwork of different campus support sources. And the next step was to find grant funds that could help sustain a thing that already existed, which is maybe a little bit backwards, but it was what we did. What we have listed here are 3 grants that we applied for, and I'm going to talk through kind of what we took away from each process. So in spring 2016, we applied for the IMLS Sparks Ignition Grant. And this would have funded our program for 1 full year, the summer and academic year. Unfortunately, we were not awarded this grant. There were 2 main criteria. The proposal had to demonstrate significant innovation, and the proposal also had to have broad potential impact. So this was a situation where our ideas for what we wanted to do didn't fully align with the goals of the grant. The DSSF program is highly specific to our context and the nature of our cross-campus collaborations. And that meant that the broad potential impact in other library settings was a bit of a tough sell, so it didn't work out for us. Fast forwarding to spring 2017, there was the Pennsylvania Consortium for the Liberal Arts grant that we applied for, and we did get this one. This was actually a cross-consortium proposal with some of our colleagues from Ursinus College and Muhlenberg College. And RC had talked a little bit earlier about the students that we hire during the summer for that fellowship versus the students that we hire to work during the academic year and support faculty projects. And this particular grant was used to pay the student wages during the 2017-2018 academic year so that they'd be able to help out with that kind of work. Some funds were also used to organize a sort of 2-day mini conference for the 3 schools' digital scholarship programs, having some guest speakers, some like tool-based workshops, a chance for people to get together and expand their community of practice to incorporate the students at other institutions. So the grant funding that we got from here was not enough to sustain an entire program by any means, but it could be used to support the work that we were already doing as we were doing it. And it was also a good opportunity for us to strengthen consortial relations and expand our students' communities of practice a little bit. And then that led us to fall 2017, the Mellon Presidential Leadership Grant, the big one. So the college was awarded this grant, and increasing the visibility of digital humanities in the classroom was just one aspect of it. So learning from our experience of applying for the Sparks grant back in spring 2016, we had to rethink and adapt the program so that it aligned with the goals of the actual Mellon grant. We learned that rhetorical overtures about how the proposal aligns with the grant's goals aren't going to be enough. We needed to make some substantive material changes to the way that we use this program. So I'll have our go to the next slide and we'll talk through some of these changes that we implemented. The first was that the Mellon grant's goal was to get students to engage with the humanities beyond minimum curricular requirements. So we set about focusing our program on supporting humanistic inquiry more specifically. So beforehand, we were trying to support as broad a range of digital scholarship projects as possible. We just loved doing that work. But this change also helped us identify the work that we were actually best capable of supporting, the humanistic research. So what that looked like is it meant hiring summer fellows who had project ideas that connected more closely to humanities research, and also tailoring our summer curriculum so that it emphasized the communication of humanistic data and what it means to visualize humanistic data. Another requirement for the Mellon grant was that it emphasized faculty development, and beforehand, we'd been very committed to this idea of providing a high-impact student experience and supporting these student-designed and student-developed research projects during the summer and during the academic year. But because of this stipulation within the grant, this idea of emphasizing faculty development, we sort of had to rethink how we were going to use that work that the students were doing. So when we were hiring the former summer fellows to continue working for us during the academic year, we had to make sure that we placed a bit more emphasis on supporting faculty-designed digital projects. So these students would still have the ability to explore independent work during the academic year, things that they were interested in themselves. But the main goal was to make sure that they were ready to support faculty-designed projects being used for courses, for example. And then finally, the Mellon grant requires us to provide an annual report every October. So this led to a couple of changes in our reporting practices. Beforehand, our funding sources were people on campus. So it was pretty easy for them to get a sense of how the program was going. They could do things like attend project presentations. But once we had to communicate that in a different way, then we had to think of how we could collect the information that we needed. So we developed some more robust ways of tracking the budget and recording any and all spending that went anywhere. Our grants office handles the official accounting for the grant, but it was important to us that we keep just as close tabs on everything as a way to just kind of demonstrate responsible stewardship and also make sure that we were keeping up on where all these expenses were going and how they were being allocated. Also, as part of this reporting process, we started to be much more intentional about collecting all evidence of impact that we could find anywhere. So the facilitators' presentations and publications, student presentations, exactly which courses and which faculty designed digital projects our students were supporting during the academic year. We even collect pieces in the campus newspaper about the program, pieces that our college's communications and marketing office publishes, anything and everything that demonstrates that kind of impact. And we try and keep all that information in one place, because having all that information in one place means that we could then use it when it became time to advocate for increased institutional support, which is something that RC is now going to discuss in more detail. So I'll turn it back over to him.
Thanks, Kevin. So what's next for us here at Gettysburg? So early this year, we were able to secure funding for our provost office after the grant funding is fully exhausted, which will allow us to continue the summer program with 4 students each year and then hire them during the academic year, which continues the arc of our program and accomplishes the goal of the grant, which is to formally institutionalize the program in a sustainable way. But then COVID-19 happened. The summer experience could not happen as before because our campus shut down, and it's a big bummer. But the good news is, though, that the Mellon Foundation has graciously agreed to extend our grant funding through the summer of 2021. So the hope is we can return to some sort of residential in-person model by then. So if you're interested in learning more about the program and how it's been impactful to our students, we do have links on the slides to the past program sites. You can see our curriculum, you can see the student projects, most importantly. There's also a book chapter which outlines the first year of the program, and by all means, please contact us, and we are always happy to chat. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, RC and Kevin. Super insightful and nice to see another Mellon example. Our next presentation, our final one, is with Franny Gady and Erin Pacell-Stoddart from University of Oregon. They're presenting Glamorous Collaboration Supporting Digital Humanities Faculty Research Projects. Thank you both.
Hi, everybody. All right. To share here and that was the wrong thing to click.
I always do that.
There we are. All right. And there's the, that's presenting all right?
Yep, you're all set.
All right, great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Glamorous Collaboration Supporting Digital Humanities Faculty Research Projects. And, oh no. Right. And I'm Franny Gady, Head of Digital Scholarship Services at University of Oregon, and
I'm Erin Pacell-Stoddart, and I'm the Strategic Projects and Grants Development Librarian also at the University of Oregon.
And today we're going to be talking about leveraging GLAM assets in research, teaching, and learning, Mellon Faculty Fellowships to advance library museum collaboration. It's quite a mouthful. So this is a 3-year, $300,000 grant from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that supported and is supporting a postdoctoral fellowship that has featured 2 postdoctoral fellows, 2 graduate employee positions, which is in supported 3 graduate employees, 6 faculty course buyouts for individual projects that are uniting complementary collections between our special collections and university archives, and the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, that is our on-campus art museum at the University of Oregon. And so these are 6 unique digital humanities projects that range from digital exhibits to open course materials that cover everything from traditional Japanese calligraphy to the American Civil Rights Movement. And we will share our slides here, and a lot of these things are linked as well. So our first 3 projects from our first year here were the March, which covers the American Civil Rights Movement, the March on Washington, a documentary film, Yokai Senjifura, which is Nosatsu votive slips about ghosts and monsters and board games. It's actually parts of the collection that are divided between our special collections and university archives and the museum, and the Artful Fabric of Collecting, which looks at the founder of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art, and her materials also divided between our special collections and the museum as well. And each of these pictures will lead you to the live version of those sites here. Right now, we're currently working on 3 more projects, Tekagami and Kyogire, which is Japanese calligraphy. Again, this is a single collection split between two institutions that will then be united digitally, that you can actually see the whole thing, which you can't actually do right now, to have and to hold. And so this is the open educational resource that I was talking about earlier. And Madness Outside In, Morningside Hospital, American Psychiatry in the Evolving Nation in the Mid-20th Century, which is going to be a podcasting project. So those are coming soon. Oh goodness, I hope. So the big idea with this project is that this is a collaboration, a literal physical collaboration with the museum across institutions. So this is everything from sponsored tours. We ensured meetings were held in both locations. With the faculty collaborators, all of these faculty members are different. Some were and are intrinsically self-motivated by passion projects, and others are prepared to hand over outlines and have the project completed for them, and it's not always who you expect. In terms of the project staff, on the museum side, this was everything from photography, metadata, access to collections. In terms of technology support, we leaned heavily on library developers for Omeka S work that was done. So a number of the projects are exhibits that are hosted on a single installation of Omeka S. So Digital Scholarship Services, my department, supported the postdoc with project management and digitization through our collection services department. This was metadata to support to help facilitate ingest into our cultural heritage repository. And the intention was to have subject liaisons attached to each project to help facilitate collaboration, to have some subject expertise attached to each project. But ultimately, that was really less important to project success than faculty dedication to outcomes and seeing the project through. So the postdoc, we've discovered, is really, it's so important to have this support. Time that's solely dedicated to the projects and helping them move forward, providing supervision and mentorship and support to the graduate employees. And because we had 2, which we didn't really expect, and you know, they brought very different types of skill sets to the project. And we found that kind of the most important skills here, at least for bringing these projects to fruition, were 1, to be painfully organized, 2, to be able to work with faculty members and to hold them to account, and 3, to have a profoundly collaborative mindset. You know, when do you call a meeting? When do you write an email? How do you run a meeting? Who should be there? Some of this kind of also applies to some extent to our graduate employees as well. So, you know, we want them to have some of that skill set, but also we want this to be a valuable learning opportunity for them. So unlike the postdoc who's working, you know, full-time benefited position here, they're working 20 hours a week and are receiving tuition remission for their positions here. So for sponsored projects, you know, they're not an everyday sort of collaborator, but we needed to report back to our funders regularly, and we also needed to reallocate funds at one point of the project as well. And Erin will talk about this more later. And finally, RC touched on this earlier, but as part of the project, we do need to report back regularly. And so one of the things that we found was really interesting, and some folks who follow like DH and Lib may have seen this pop up at one point, but we became really interested in kind of quantifying DH in a number of ways. We did intensive time tracking for our first 3 projects. We did exit interviews with the faculty and the staff who worked on the projects. And we built these reports for public consumption that talks about like what goes into these projects. So when we share our slides, you'll be able to click on these numbers here and see the SWAY reports that we did that really talk about like what goes into building a digital humanities project. What kind of time does it take? What skills does it take? Now I'm going to pass it over to Erin now.
Great, thanks, Franny. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the administrative and different things that we have added to the grant. So the first thing that I wanted to acknowledge is the excellent work that's currently coming out of the IMLS recently funded Collective Responsibility Labor Toolkit. This project has brought really important conversations to the forefront about worker equity in grant-funded projects. And I think that one way that this can be emphasized is through mentoring, which we directly baked into our Mellon grant project. So a few different ways that we did that was through structured mentoring opportunities between grant-funded and library museum staff identified as having responsibilities related to our grant-funded people's career goals. Unstructured peer mentoring opportunities between grant-funded and library museum staff to trade skills and experiences with each other kind of on a daily and weekly basis. Exposure to different departmental meetings, which allowed grant-funded staff to be part of conversations around topics, things such as curation, digital scholarship, and to have participation in our all-staff meetings to help them all be exposed to what it's like to work in a large organization. Other things include time and funding to pursue professional development opportunities that are both relevant to the grant and of interest to their professional career. So things like panel presentations at national and state conferences, both in person and then virtually when COVID-19 hit this spring, workshop training to improve technical skills, and an opportunity to produce co-written scholarly publications such as articles and book chapters that are related to the grant. And finally, a commitment to support grant-funded positions moving into their professional career through doing things like resume and CV and cover letter reviews. Next slide. Thanks, Randy. So this particular grant, we'll be honest, was challenging due to an unexpected role turnover that happened multiple times. So the original PIs both left at different points. One left for a new dean position and one decided to join retirement. In both cases, library and museum staff had to step in during these transitions to help the new PIs bring them up to speed. Another instance was one graduate assistant left after the first year to pursue a teaching opportunity. But I think that we would agree that the most unexpected was the postdoc position. So this was originally set to be a full-time position for 2 years. However, the first postdoc ended up leaving after the first year to go forward and complete a certificate in data management. And our second postdoc left after 6 months for a really unique position at the Smithsonian. So while the postdoc transitions were completely unexpected, they were both positive in that each postdoc left to pursue kind of their next dream career scenario. We like to hope that it's in somewhat due to the mentoring and preparation that they received from this project. So the other major challenge in all of these position transitions fell on library and museum staff to work through a lot of the administrative challenges of hiring new personnel on a really tight timeline that's been acknowledged by multiple presenters today. It also meant that the burden really fell on library and museum staff to shift gears for supervision of the graduate assistants, to help manage and maintain expectations on the faculty projects, and to onboard new personnel again. So some of the lessons that we learned included understanding that if your department is written into grants, it is totally possible that your time could increase suddenly and exponentially at any time, i.e. you might be the backup plan, as Franny has said. On the administrative side, it has been worth taking some time to identify kind of another backup plan at a higher level in case these transitions need to occur. Next slide. And so then we were really already facing personnel challenges when COVID-19 hit the United States hard in March. So the coronavirus further exacerbated some grant timelines and workflows. First, faculty were not necessarily ready to shift their projects to work remotely. While faculty had one course buyout for their time, they still needed to shift their remaining courses to being online within a week. Faculty still felt slightly uncomfortable working on digital projects, and things like illness and administrative responsibility also majorly affected original timelines. Second, we had to quickly transition all of our staff to work remotely from home, and this affected the grant in a few ways, including one example is podcasts. Our podcasts were supposed to be created using the library's new recording studio, and this required a really fast switch to using technology at hand at home, such as smartphones, to record in non-optimal locations. A lot of our plans for promotional events, such as in-person launch parties, would prove to be impossible between campus closures and state mandates for social distancing. Also included in this are things like a physical exhibit that was meant to celebrate all 6 faculty projects will need to be delayed until the fall. And the possibility still exists, like most of us, that all of these will need to be moved online. And then due to some salary savings from all of these transitions, we were able to request a budget reallocation to keep our graduate assistants on throughout the summer so they could help with assisting with project delays and cleanup on projects. So these are just a few ways in which we've had to administratively react to COVID-19 and how it has impacted this grant. And I will just say that having lived through this for even just a few short months, it's already affected how our libraries will consider and plan for future grant proposals. And I'd say that while we all may be comfortable working with digital tools, we are still sitting here grappling with how to work with collections that are mainly physical and staff that are used to working together physically, whether that's in our digital labs or in our different locations on campus. So I'll stop there so we can have time for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I'd like it if we could all virtually or physically thank our presenters and applaud them for their excellent presentations. My dog is looking at me funny. Thank you all so much. Those were fabulous presentations and incredibly helpful for, I think, all of us in the profession. Since we only have a couple of minutes, we have about 2 minutes, there were a couple of questions, but I'm going to make the executive decision and highlight one specific one for all of you to reflect on and address. And that's primarily the role of librarians as grant PIs. The fact that Haley and Sarah pointed this out specifically, I think speaks to there's some sort of friction with us coming from a service-oriented profession. And so if any of you would like to respond to that on how you approach that as a librarian, as a PI in these roles.
I'll just say that not having, I don't actually have a formal role on this Mellon project that we've been working on. And so having to carve out time and space to take on these responsibilities has been challenging over the past, I mean, honestly, for the past 2 years, but particularly now that, we're unable to fill the postdoctoral position. And so, as we're looking at, grants in the future that involve both me and my department, anything that's particularly significant, we're absolutely looking to ensure that, that we have a PI on the project. And so we had a grant that we applied for earlier and pushed, I think, harder than we might have otherwise given this experience to ensure that I was a PI on the project. So do you think it's important?
I'll chime in to say that I actually think when we're looking at these, it's really important that libraries, archives, museums have a voice at the table. And a lot of times that is really coming through the PI. The PI is the person or people who are kind of that connected dot across campus. And a lot of times if you're not in that role or have someone who can be representative in there, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. Your voice isn't kind of at the forefront for some of these things. And maybe you're just kind of asked to submit a report at the end or something like that. So I actually would advocate that while it is stressful, and the need for kind of communicating and learning what that means on your campus to be a PI, that it's extremely helpful if you are able to do that.
Erin, we will agree with you wholeheartedly. It is very stressful, but you know, librarians have, especially on campuses, have this incredible ability to break through any silos that exist. And so that, like, we are the connective tissue, and so serving as that PI is almost a natural fit. It is a lot of work. It's incredibly rewarding. The first time is super scary. We've always been PIs because we started with our own small stuff.
And we've grown into the PIs on this NEH grant, which I don't think we would have undertaken had this been our first or second foray into doing grants and being PIs. But I think from the very beginning, we've always recognized that being the PI gave us the control to maybe like meld the project into exactly what we wanted it to be. And so we've always really pursued that PI role. We think it's super, super important.
And if we can do it, so can you.
I also think one sort of way that I think our role has grown over time on campus is really embracing the research nature of the information science piece of what we do, and sort of really emphasizing that coming up with a new metadata schema is research. Like, it's hard, it's intellectual labor. You know, coming up with a new set of APIs that can talk to each other is hard, it's intellectual labor. And a really effective, a lot of folks have talked about this before, so this certainly isn't, you know, just my idea, but a really effective way in for us has been data management plans, where people come and they say, the NEH is asking for a thing. And then we talk through, and we actually have like an interview process that we've documented some, and we say, what are these? And as you start that conversation, then you end up talking about preservation and metadata and sort of data models, and you can kind of start to have those conversations. And then over time, people say, oh, there is a sphere of knowledge that I, as a subject expert, don't know about. And information science is an academic approach, archival science as well, like I would include that too.
Wonderful. Would anyone else like to chime in? I think we're at time. But okay, if you have any other questions for our presenters, please get in touch with them. If you are unable to find their contact information, track down one of us conveners or however else seems appropriate to you. We again have these community documents that or group notes that we've created together. Thank you for everyone who contributed. We'll share those out with a recording on the Digital Humanities Discussion Group list in a couple of days. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.